The morning sun rose over Earth like it had done for billions of years, golden and warm and full of promise. And nobody knew that this would be the last normal day humanity would ever see Commander. Elena Vasquez sat in her office deep inside NORAD, the military base buried within Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. And she sipped her coffee while reading reports that seemed so unimportant now when she looked back on them. She was 42 years old with gray streaks in her black hair and scars on her hands from 20 years of military service. And she had seen war in all its ugly forms. But nothing in her experience could have prepared her for what was about to happen at exactly 9 in the morning. Every radar system on Earth began screaming warnings at the same time. Vasquez jumped from her chair and ran to the command center, where dozens of screens showed something impossible. Something that made her heart stop in her chest. 4,000 objects were descending through the atmosphere. And they were not meteors, and they were not satellites. And they were not anything that humans had ever built. They were ships. Massive and dark and shaped like nothing from Earth. And they moved with a speed and precision that made human aircraft look like toys. "What the hell is that?" shouted a young technician. His voice cracking with fear. Vasquez grabbed the phone to call the Pentagon. But before she could speak, the first alien ship fired its weapon. A beam of blue light struck New York City, and in less than 1 second, everything within 10 miles of Times Square simply stopped existing. There was no explosion, no fire, no warning. 8 million people died before they could even scream. Vasquez watched the screams in horror as the same scene repeated across the globe. London vanished in a flash of blue light. Beijing disappeared like it had never existed. Mumbai, Tokyo, Paris, Moscow, Sydney, Cairo, Rio de Janeiro. One by one, the great cities of Earth were erased from existence. Military response was immediate but completely useless. Fighter jets launched from bases around the world. Brave pilots flying toward the alien ships with missiles ready. But their weapons bounced off invisible shields like raindrops hitting a window. Vasquez watched as hundreds of jets fell from the sky, shot down by weapons that moved faster than anything human eyes could track. Nuclear missiles launched from submarines and silos. Humanity's ultimate weapons, the fire that could end civilizations. And they did absolutely nothing. The aliens had shields that stopped everything. And their ships continued their work without pause, without mercy, without any sign that they even noticed humanity's desperate attempts to fight back. By noon, half of Earth's population was dead. By sunset, the number had risen to 5 billion. Vasquez stayed at her post even as the mountain shook from distant impacts. Even as communication systems failed one by one. Even as the screams on the radio faded into static silence, she tried to coordinate what was left of the military. But there was almost nothing left to coordinate. Armies had been wiped out. Navies had been sunk. Air forces had been destroyed. Governments had been decapitated. And the chain of command had shattered into a million broken pieces on the second day. The aliens finally spoke. Every screen on Earth, every radio, every phone, every device that could receive a signal displayed the same message. And it was not a greeting, and it was not a negotiation. And it was not a demand. It was simply a statement of fact. "This planet now belongs to the Velthri Dominion," said a cold voice that seemed to have no emotion at all. "Humanity is now property, and resistance will result in complete extinction. And you will serve or you will die. And there are no other options." Vasquez listened to the message with her fists clenched so tight that her nails drew blood from her palms. Property. They called us, she thought, like we were animals. Like we were things to be owned and used and thrown away. On the third day, the killing finally slowed, not because the Velthri showed mercy, but because they had killed almost everyone they wanted to kill. 6.2 billion humans were dead. The survivors, maybe 800 million scattered across the planet, hid in places the aliens had not bothered to destroy. Underground bunkers, remote mountain villages, deep forests, abandoned mines, subway tunnels, anywhere that offered shelter from the death that rained from the sky. Vasquez found herself trapped in NORAD with 47 other survivors, a mix of soldiers and scientists and support staff who had been lucky enough to be deep underground. When the attack began, the base was badly damaged, half collapsed, with power failing and air getting thin. "But they were alive, Commander," said a young sergeant named Chun, his face covered in dust and blood. "What do we do now?" Vasquez looked at the faces around her, saw the fear and the grief and the shock in their eyes, and she felt something cold and hard forming in her chest. It was not despair, it was rage. "We survive," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "We hide, we learn, we grow stronger. And then we make them pay for every single life they took." A scientist named Dr. Marcus Webb shook his head, his glasses cracked and his hands trembling. "How can we fight them?" he asked. "You saw what they did. Our weapons are useless against their shields. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. We are nothing to them." Vasquez grabbed him by the shoulders and forced him to meet her eyes. "Listen to me," she said. "Humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own stupidity for thousands of years. And we did not survive all of that just to be wiped out by some aliens who think they can own us." She released him and looked at the others. "They made a mistake," she continued. "They could have killed all of us, but they did not. And that means there are survivors everywhere, hiding, waiting, watching, and as long as even one human is alive, there is hope." Over the next few weeks, Vasquez led her small group out of the ruined base and into the wilderness. They moved at night, hiding during the day, avoiding the alien patrols that swept across the landscape looking for survivors to capture. The world outside was almost unrecognizable. Cities were gone, replaced by smooth craters of glass where the alien weapons had struck. The Valkyrie had begun building massive structures, harvesting stations that pulled resources from the earth, and processing centers where captured humans were taken and never seen again. Vasquez watched one of these stations from a distant hillside, saw humans being herded like cattle by tall, insect-like aliens with 4 arms and black eyes that showed no emotion. She counted the guards, studied their patrol patterns, noted the location of their vehicles and weapons. "We cannot attack that," Chan whispered beside her. "There must be 100 of them down there." "Not yet," Vasquez agreed. "But we will, and someday we will tear it all down. And we will build something from the wreckage. And we will make them understand that they should never have come here." She turned away from the station and led her people deeper into the mountains, toward a network of caves where they could hide and plan and begin the long work of rebuilding. As she walked, she made a silent promise to the 6 billion dead, to her parents in Miami who she would never see again, to her sister in Chicago who had surely not survived, to every person who had been erased by the Valkyrie's blue fire. "We will remember you," she thought, "and we will avenge you. And the universe will learn that humanity does not break, and humanity does not surrender, and humanity never, ever forgets." The first night of the resistance had begun, and though the road ahead was long and dark and full of death, the fire of vengeance was already burning in the hearts of the survivors. The Valkyrie had wanted slaves. They had created something far more dangerous. They had created an enemy that would never stop, never forgive, and never show mercy. And someday, the stars themselves would tremble at what they had unleashed. 5 years had passed since the sky burned and the world died, and humanity had learned to live in the shadows like rats hiding from eagles. Commander Elena Vasquez stood in a vast underground cavern beneath the Swiss Alps, surrounded by hundreds of people who had become the core of Earth's resistance. And she watched as engineers worked on something that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. It was an alien ship, captured in a daring raid 6 months earlier. Now, torn apart and spread across dozens of workbenches where human scientists studied every component with desperate intensity. How much longer until we understand the shield technology? Vasquez asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a small Japanese woman with tired eyes and oil-stained hands, who had become the Resistance's greatest hope. We are close, Tanaka replied, her voice filled with exhausted excitement. Their shields operate on a specific frequency, like a radio signal. And if we can match that frequency with the right counterpulse, we can punch through. Vasquez felt her heart beat faster at these words. For 5 years, the Velthury shields had made them invincible, and every human attack had failed because no weapon could touch them. But if Tanaka was right, that was about to change. The Resistance had grown from scattered survivors into something much larger and more dangerous across the planet. Hidden bases operated in secret, connected by a network of messengers and coded radio signals, all working toward a single goal: the complete destruction of the Velthury Occupation General Marcus Stone, a man who had lost his wife and 3 children in the first hour of the invasion. Had unified these cells into the Terran Reclamation Army. He was a hard man, cold and focused, with eyes that held nothing but hatred for the aliens who had taken everything from him. Report from the European sector, Stone said, walking up to Vasquez with a tablet in his hand. Our scouts have identified a weakness in the Velthury supply lines near the old German border. Vasquez studied the information, her tactical mind already working on possibilities. If we hit them here, she said, pointing to a spot on the map, we could capture more technology and maybe even take some prisoners. Prisoners? Stone's voice was sharp with disgust. Why would we want prisoners? Because we need to understand them, Vasquez replied calmly. We need to know how they think, what they fear, where their weaknesses are. And the only way to learn that is to talk to them. Stone looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded slowly. You have always been smarter than me about these things, he admitted. Do what you think is best. Life in the Resistance was hard, beyond anything the survivors had ever imagined. They lived underground, eating whatever food they could grow in hydroponic gardens or steal from Velthury supply convoys. They trained constantly, learning to fight with weapons salvaged from the enemy, pushing their bodies and minds to the absolute limit. And every single one of them carried a weight of grief that never got lighter. Vasquez walked through the living quarters, past families huddled together in small rooms carved from rock, past children who had never known a world without alien occupation, past old people who remembered the time before and cried themselves to sleep every night. She stopped at a small memorial wall covered with photographs and names. Thousands of faces of people who had died in the invasion or in the years that followed. Her sister's photo was there, smiling in a summer dress from a vacation they had taken together 10 years ago. I miss you, Vasquez whispered, touching the image gently. But I have not forgotten what I promised. The captured Velthury provided information that changed everything. Its name was Crix, and it was a low-ranking officer who had been knocked unconscious when the Resistance ambushed its patrol at first. Crix refused to speak, its forearms crossed in defiance and its black eyes showing nothing but contempt for the humans who held it. But Vasquez was patient, and she was smart, and she understood that even aliens had things they cared about. You have a family on your homeworld, she said one day, sitting across from Crix in the interrogation room. 2 offspring, still young, and a mate who waits for you. Crix's mandibles clicked in surprise, and for the first time, emotion flickered in those dark eyes. How do you know this? The alien demanded. We found your personal device, Vasquez replied. We could not read the language, but we recognized the images. And a parent holding their children looks the same in any species. She leaned forward, her voice softening. I am not going to threaten your family, and I'm not going to hurt you. But I need you to understand something. We are not the mindless animals your leaders told you we were. Over the following weeks, Crix began to talk. The alien explained how the Velthury Dominion worked. A vast empire spanning hundreds of star systems, built on the conquest and enslavement of weaker species. Humanity was just the latest in a long line of victims, chosen because Earth was rich in resources and because humans seemed too divided and primitive to pose any threat. Your leaders made a mistake, Crix said one day, its translator device rendering its clicks and whistles into flat English. They should have killed all of you, but they were greedy and they wanted slaves. And now you are becoming something dangerous. What do you mean? Vasquez asked at Crix's mandibles, spread in what might have been a smile or might have been something else entirely. In all the centuries of Dominion expansion, no conquered species has ever fought back like you do. And no conquered species has ever learned our technology so quickly. And the reports from this planet are starting to worry the High Council. This news spread through the resistance like fire through dry grass, filling the survivors with something they had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope, if the Velthury were worried. It meant that humanity was doing something right if the Velthury were worried. It meant that victory might actually be possible. Dr. Tanaka finally cracked the shield frequency on a cold winter night, bursting into Vasquez's quarters with tears streaming down her face. I did it, she shouted, her voice cracking with emotion. I figured it out, and I can build a weapon that will break through their shields, and we can finally hurt them. Vasquez pulled the scientist into a fierce hug, feeling her own eyes grow wet. You just changed the course of history, she said. You just gave us a chance to win. The next few months were a blur of activity. Every factory the resistance controlled, every workshop, every engineer and technician worked around the clock to produce the new weapons. They called them shield breakers. Simple missiles fitted with Tanaka's frequency disruptor. And they built thousands of them at the same time. The resistance began capturing Velthury ships, using them to train human pilots who would one day take the war to Space General Stone. Despite his hatred, proved to be a brilliant organizer, coordinating the efforts of resistance cells across the globe into a single unified force. And Vasquez, the woman who had crawled from the ruins of Nard with nothing but rage in her heart, became the symbol of human defiance. The Velthury knew something was changing. Their patrols reported more attacks, more ambushes, more supply convoys that never arrived. But they were arrogant, and they were complacent, and they refused to believe that mere humans could ever pose a real threat. That arrogance would cost them everything. On the night before the Great Offensive, Vasquez addressed the assembled leaders of the resistance via hologram, her image appearing in bunkers and caves and hidden bases across the planet. Tomorrow, we begin the liberation of Earth, she said, her voice steady and strong. For 5 years, we have hidden and planned and built our strength. And now it is time to show the Velthury what humanity is capable of. She paused, her eyes blazing with cold fire. They came here to harvest us, but we have learned their secrets and stolen their weapons. And tomorrow we will teach them that Earth is not theirs to take. The resistance fighters cheered, their voices echoing through underground chambers. And for the first time since the invasion, the sound was not grief or fear, it was rage, and it was hope. And it was the promise of vengeance finally within reach. The long night of occupation was ending. Dawn of humanity's revenge was about to begin. The 6th anniversary of the slaughter dawned gray and cold, and across the planet, hidden resistance fighters checked their weapons one final time and whispered prayers to gods. They were not sure, still listened. Commander Elena Vasquez crouched in a tunnel beneath the ruins of Paris, surrounded by 50 of the best soldiers humanity had left, and she studied the holographic map floating in front of her above them. Hovering over the shattered remains of the Eiffel Tower sat the Valkyrie command ship for the entire European sector. A massive vessel nearly 2 kilometers long that controlled all alien operations across half a continent. The shield breaker missiles are in position, reported Sergeant Chun, now a hardened veteran with scars covering half his face. All teams report ready. Vasquez nodded, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. This was Operation Prometheus, the most ambitious attack the Resistance had ever attempted, and if it failed, humanity might never get another chance. The plan was complex but brilliant. Resistance cells across the globe would attack Valkyrie installations simultaneously, creating chaos and confusion and drawing the aliens' attention away from the real objective, while the enemy scrambled to respond to dozens of attacks. Vasquez's team would infiltrate the Paris command ship and steal something far more valuable than any territory. They were going to steal the Valkyrie navigation database, the complete record of every world in the Dominion. Every colony, every military base, every secret with that information. Humanity could take the war to the stars. 30 seconds to global assault. The radio crackled with General Stone's voice. All units stand by. Vasquez looked at her soldiers, saw the determination in their eyes, and felt a fierce pride swelling in her chest. These men and women had survived the apocalypse and spent 6 years fighting an enemy that should have been unstoppable. And not one of them showed any fear. "Remember why we fight," she said quietly. "Remember everyone we lost and make them proud." The clock hit 0. And the world exploded. Shield breaker missiles launched from hidden positions across every continent, streaking toward Valkyrie installations with deadly accuracy. For the first time in 6 years, alien shields flickered and failed for the first time in 6 years. Valkyrie soldiers screamed as human weapons tore through their defenses. The harvesting station in Australia vanished in a ball of fire as resistance fighters overwhelmed its garrison. The processing center in Brazil fell to an Aryan army of former slaves who had been waiting years for this moment. Communication towers, supply depots, patrol bases all across the planet. The symbols of Valkyrie occupation crumbled to dust above Paris. The command ship's alarms began wailing as reports of attacks flooded in from every direction. The alien admiral, a massive Valkyrie named Kreth, who had personally ordered the deaths of millions, stared at the chaos on his screens with disbelief. "This is impossible," he snarled, his mandibles clicking furiously. "How are the humans destroying our shields?" His officers scrambled to respond, dispatching reinforcements to the most threatened locations. Completely focused on the crisis unfolding across the globe, none of them noticed a small team of humans creeping through the maintenance tunnels. Beneath the ship, Vasquez led the way, her pulse rifle humming with deadly energy, her movements silent and precise. They had studied the ship's blueprints for months, memorizing every corridor and junction, and they moved through the alien vessel like ghosts. The first Valkyrie guard died without making a sound, Chen's knife sliding between the plates of its armor and finding the soft flesh beneath. The second and third fell to silent shots from weapons modified to produce no noise, but the fourth guard managed to trigger an alarm before Vasquez put a round through its skull. And suddenly the entire ship knew they were there. "Move," Vasquez shouted, abandoning stealth for speed. "We have maybe 5 minutes before they lock down the data core." The team sprinted through corridors filled with flashing red lights, cutting down every alien that stood in their way. They fought through security checkpoints and sealed doors, losing soldiers with every obstacle, but never slowing down. Private Torres took a plasma bolt to the chest, saving Vasquez from an ambush, dying with a smile on his face and the words, "Give them hell," on his lips. Lieutenant Park held a corridor alone against a dozen enemies, buying the team precious seconds before being overwhelmed by the time they reached the data core. Only 20 of the original 50 remained. The door to the core was sealed with the strongest locks the Valkyrie possessed. But Dr. Tanaka, who had insisted on joining the mission, pulled out a device she had been working on for months. "Cover me for 30 seconds, she said. Her fingers flying across the alien interface. Vasquez and her soldiers formed a defensive circle, firing at enemies approaching from every direction, their ammunition running low and their bodies exhausted. 20 seconds. A grenade exploded nearby, throwing 2 soldiers against the wall and filling the air with smoke and screaming. 10 seconds. Chen went down with a wound in his leg, still firing even as he fell, taking 3 aliens with him before his rifle clicked empty. Now. The door slid open, revealing a vast chamber filled with glowing crystalline structures that held the sum of all. Valkyrie Knowledge Vasquez rushed inside while her remaining soldiers held the entrance. Their last stand buying her the moment she needed. She found the navigation database exactly where Crix had told them it would be. A pulsing sphere of light containing the locations of every world in the Dominion. As she reached for it, a voice spoke from behind her. Impressive. For a primitive, Vasquez spun to find Admiral Kreth standing in a secondary entrance, a plasma pistol aimed at her heart. He was huge, nearly 3 meters tall, with armor decorated in the symbols of 100 conquered worlds. "You have caused more damage today than any species in Dominion history," Kreth said, his voice cold with fury. "But it ends here. And you will tell me how you broke our shields before you die." Vasquez smiled. "And it was not a nice smile. You want to know our secret?" she asked, slowly raising her hands. "The secret is that you should have killed all of us when you had the chance, in one fluid motion." She drew her sidearm and fired the shield breaker round, miniaturized and fitted into a pistol by Tanaka's genius. Punched through Kreth's personal shield like it was paper. The Admiral had one moment of absolute shock before the plasma bolt struck his chest and burned a hole through his body. He collapsed, his mandibles still clicking in disbelief. And Vasquez stood over him with no mercy in her eyes. "You called us property," she said. "You were wrong." She grabbed the navigation database and ran. The escape was a nightmare of fire and blood, fighting through corridors filled with enraged aliens, carrying wounded comrades, leaving the dead behind. Of the 50 soldiers who had entered the ship, only 9 made it back to the extraction point, but they had the database as their stolen shuttle screamed away from the command ship. Vasquez watched the Valkyrie vessel listing in the sky, crippled by the sabotage her team had planted during their escape across the planet. Reports flooded in. The global assault had been a massive success, destroying dozens of major installations and liberating thousands of human prisoners. The Valkyrie occupation, once seemingly invincible, had been dealt a wound it might never recover from. General Stone's voice came over the radio, rough with emotion. "Vasquez, did you get it?" She looked at the glowing sphere in her hands, containing the key to victory. "The map to every enemy world. We got it," she replied. "We know where they live now, and it is time to bring the war to them." That night, in bunkers across the globe, resistance fighters celebrated the greatest victory humanity had ever achieved. They had proven that the Valkyrie could be hurt. They had proven that the Valkyrie could be defeated, and soon, very soon, they would prove that the Valkyrie could be destroyed. The hunters had become the hunted, and humanity was just getting started. 3 years after Operation Prometheus, humanity stood on the edge of something that had once seemed impossible. Taking the war beyond, Earth Commander Elena Vasquez floated in zero gravity aboard the TRS Vengeance, flagship of the Black Fleet, and she stared through the viewport at a sight that filled her heart with fierce pride. 300 warships hung in the darkness of space, built in secret orbital shipyards from captured Valkyrie technology and human determination. They were not pretty ships. Rough and angular, where the alien vessels were smooth and elegant, but they were deadly, and they were ready. And they carried the hopes of every survivor on Earth. Final status report. General Stone's voice came through the command channel. All ships confirm weapons loaded and crews at battle stations. Navigation locked in, added Dr. Tanaka, who had traded her laboratory for the Vengeance's science station. We have calculated the jump coordinates to Valkyrie space. Vasquez turned to face the bridge crew. Men and women who had fought their way up from the ruins of civilization to reach this moment. Every one of them had lost someone in the slaughter. Every one of them had spent years fighting in the shadows. And every one of them burned with the same cold fire that had kept humanity alive through the darkest times. The Valkyrie think we are beaten, Vasquez said, her voice carrying across the ship's intercom. They think that because they pushed us back underground on Earth, because their reinforcements recaptured some of what we took, that we have given up. She paused, letting the silence stretch. They are wrong. And today we show them exactly how wrong they are. The Black Fleet had been humanity's greatest secret, built over 3 years in shipyards, hidden in the asteroid belt, crewed by volunteers who knew they might never see Earth again, while the Valkyrie focused on crushing the remaining resistance on the planet's surface. Humanity had been quietly preparing something far more ambitious. The navigation database stolen during Operation Prometheus had revealed everything about the Dominion structure, including the location of their military staging areas and the routes their supply convoys traveled. But more importantly, it had revealed that the Valkyrie homeworld, the heart of their empire, was defended by only a small garrison. The Dominion had grown arrogant over 10,000 years of conquest, and they never imagined that a primitive species would dare attack their sacred world. That arrogance was about to cost them everything, Admiral Vasquez, said the communications officer, using the title she had been given after Operation Prometheus. We are receiving a transmission from Earth Command. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of General Stone, who had stayed behind to coordinate the ground war. Elena, he said, his weathered face showing rare emotion. The whole planet is watching. Every survivor is praying for you. So make it count. We will, Vasquez replied. Keep fighting down there, and we will clear the skies above you. The transmission ended, and Vasquez took her seat in the command chair. All ships, she ordered, engage jump drives. The Black Fleet vanished from Earth's solar system in a flash of light, traveling faster than anything humans had ever built before. Crossing the vast distances between stars in moments, they emerged at the edge of the Valkyrie home system. And immediately their sensors screamed warnings. A Dominion fleet was waiting for them, 200 warships, sleek and deadly, arranged in a defensive formation around the system's outer planets. They knew we were coming, Tanaka said. Her voice tight with concern. Vasquez studied the enemy formation, her tactical mind racing through possibilities. No, she said slowly. This is not an ambush. And look at their positioning. They are preparing to jump somewhere else. She was right. The Valkyrie fleet had been assembled to launch a massive assault on Earth. A final crushing blow meant to end human resistance forever. They had not expected the humans to come to them for a long moment. The two fleets faced each other across the void, neither moving, both waiting. Then the Valkyrie admiral, a veteran commander named Thrall, who had conquered a dozen worlds, broadcast a message to the human ships. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick, Thrall said, contempt dripping from every translated word. Your stolen ships and primitive tactics cannot defeat the Dominion's finest warriors. Vasquez opened a channel of her own. You are the ones who should surrender, she replied calmly. You have no idea what we are capable of, and after today, the whole galaxy will know that humanity is not to be underestimated. Thrall's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Arrogant creatures. You will learn your place. The Velthari fleet surged forward, confident in their superior numbers and technology, ready to crush this annoying human rebellion once and for all. They did not know about the shield breakers. The first wave of human missiles looked like ordinary weapons, and the Velthari officers barely bothered to track them, knowing their shields would stop anything the primitives could throw. Then the missiles hit, and the shields failed Velthari ships exploded like fireworks, one after another, their crews dying before they could even understand what was happening. Thrall watched in horror as his fleet dissolved around him, his unbeatable armada being torn apart by enemies who should have been helpless. How is this possible? He screamed. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. But they could, and they did. And the Battle of Neptune's Gate, as it would later be called, became a slaughter not of humans this time, but of Veltharavas commanded her fleet with cold precision, directing her ships like a conductor leading an orchestra, exploiting every weakness in the enemy formation. The Vengeance carved through the heart of the Velthar fleet, its weapons blazing, leaving a trail of burning debris in its wake. Chun, now recovered from his wounds and commanding his own ship, led a squadron that flanked the enemy and cut off their retreat. Tanaka's science team worked frantically to jam Velthari communications, preventing them from calling for reinforcements hour after hour. The battle raged across millions of kilometers, human ships dancing around the larger Velthari vessels, striking and withdrawing, never giving the enemy a clear target. When it was over, the Velthari fleet was gone. 112 human ships had been destroyed. Thousands of brave men and women lost to the void. But not a single enemy vessel remained. Admiral Thrall died on his burning bridge. Still unable to believe that humans had defeated him, Vasquez stood on the deck of the Vengeance, surrounded by cheering crew members. And she allowed herself one moment of satisfaction, but only one moment. This is not over, she announced, silencing the celebration. We have won a battle, but the war continues, and our real target is still ahead. She pointed at the distant star that was the Velthari sun. Velthar Prime awaits, and we will not stop until their empire burns. The surviving ships of the Black Fleet reformed around the Vengeance, battered but unbroken, and they began their approach to the enemy homeworld. Behind them, the wreckage of the Velthari fleet drifted in silence, a monument to the price of underestimating humanity across the galaxy. Other species watched with amazement as news of the battle spread for 10,000 years. The Velthari Dominion had seemed invincible now, for the first time. They had been defeated, and the species that had defeated them, the primitives who should have been nothing more than slaves, were coming for more. The universe would never be the same. Humanity had announced its presence among the stars, not with a whisper, but with a roar of vengeance and fire, and they were only getting started. Velthar Prime had never known war within its atmosphere, and for 10,000 years, its people had lived in perfect safety while their fleets conquered the galaxy. That era ended when the Black Fleet appeared in the sky above their greatest city. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the TRS Vengeance and looked down at the alien world, a planet of blue oceans and purple continents and cities that glittered like jewels beneath the morning sun. It was beautiful, she thought, and then she remembered the day when alien ships had appeared above Earth, when her sister had died, when 6 billion humans had been erased from existence. Beauty meant nothing anymore. Only justice mattered. All ships report ready for orbital bombardment, Chun announced, his voice cold and professional. Ground forces are prepared for drop. Vasquez nodded, but did not immediately give the order. Instead, she opened a channel to the planet's surface, broadcasting on every frequency the Velthari used. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Reclamation Army, she said, her voice echoing across a world that had never heard such defiance. 9 years ago, your people came to our planet and murdered 6 billion innocent beings. And you called us property, and you treated us like animals. And you thought we would break." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We did not break. And now we stand above your homeworld with weapons that can burn your cities to glass. And you have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. Or we will show you the same mercy you showed us." The Velthari response came within minutes. The High Council, the ruling body of the Dominion, appeared on screen. 5 ancient Velthari in ceremonial robes, their mandibles clicking nervously as they faced the human admiral. "This aggression is unacceptable," declared the eldest, a Velthari named Prime Counselor Veth. "The Dominion has ruled this sector for 10 millennia, and we will not bow to primitives." "You have 55 minutes, Vasquez replied. "Choose wisely." The hour that followed was the longest of Vasquez's life. She watched the planet below, saw the panic spreading through Velthari cities as civilians realized that for the first time in their history, they were the ones under threat. Part of her wanted to give the order immediately, to burn everything, to make them suffer the way humanity had suffered, but she was not like them. And humanity would prove its superiority, not through cruelty, but through strength tempered with something the Velthari had never understood: choice. When the deadline arrived, the High Council had not surrendered. Instead, they had mobilized their planetary defense forces, a fleet of 200 ships that rose from the surface to challenge the Black Fleet. They chose poorly, Chum said quietly. Vasquez felt no joy as she gave the order to engage. The battle above Velthar Prime lasted 6 hours, and it was brutal and bloody, and terrible human ships fell burning from the sky, their crews dying far from the world they had fought so long to avenge. Velthari vessels exploded under the relentless assault of shield-breaker weapons, their defenders learning too late that courage alone could not stop enemies who had nothing left to lose. When the last defensive ship had been destroyed, Vasquez ordered the ground assault to begin. Human marines dropped from orbit in armored pods, crashing into the heart of the Velthari capital like meteors of vengeance. They fought through streets designed for beings twice their size, using their smaller stature and human creativity to ambush defenders who had never faced a real enemy on their home soil. Sergeant Chun led the assault on the council chambers, his power armor scarred from a dozen close calls, his rifle never stopping as he carved a path through the enemy DR. Tanaka coordinated the electronic warfare, shutting down Velthari communications and defenses, turning their own technology against them, and Vasquez herself led the final push to the throne room where the High Council had retreated, fighting alongside her soldiers like she had done since the first days of the resistance. The doors to the throne room fell after 3 hours of fighting, blasted open by human explosives, and Vasquez walked through the smoke and debris to face the rulers of the empire that had tried to destroy her people. The 5 counselors stood before their thrones, surrounded by the last of their guards, defiant even in defeat. "You cannot do this," Prime Counselor Veth said, his voice trembling with rage. "We are the Dominion, and we have ruled for 10,000 years, and we will not be judged by creatures we were harvesting less than a decade ago." Vasquez stopped in front of him, her armor covered in the blood of his soldiers, her eyes holding no mercy. "You keep talking about what you were," she said. "Let me tell you what you are now. Finished." She turned to address the surviving counselors. "Your fleets are destroyed, and your colonies are being liberated by species you enslaved centuries ago. And your empire is crumbling around you because you made one fatal mistake." "And what mistake was that?" Veth demanded. "You left survivors," Vasquez replied. "You killed 6 billion humans, but you left 800 million alive, and that was enough. Because humanity does not need much to survive, and we need even less to fight back." She gestured to the human soldiers spreading through the throne room, their weapons trained on the counselors. You thought we were weak because we fought among ourselves. But you did not understand that our conflicts made us stronger, that our wars taught us how to adapt and survive and never, ever give up. The counselors were taken into custody, their guards disarmed, their empire brought to its knees by the very species they had dismissed as primitives. In the days that followed, the Terran Reclamation Army secured Velthor Prime and began the process of dismantling the Dominion. Vasquez broadcast a message to every world in the former empire. A message that was translated into hundreds of languages and heard by billions of beings. The Dominion is over, she announced. Earth and its allies offer freedom to any species that desires it, and justice to any that choose aggression. And let this be a warning to every power in the galaxy. Humanity remembers its friends, and it never forgets its enemies. She paused, her voice softening. We did not want this war, but it was forced upon us. And we fought not for conquest, but for survival. And we won because we refused to surrender even when everything seemed hopeless. 1 year later, Vasquez returned to Earth. The planet was healing, cities rising from the ruins, children playing in streets that had once been choked with debris. She visited the memorial in Geneva, the black obelisk bearing the names of the 6 billion who had died in the slaughter. And she placed her hand against the cold stone. We did it, she whispered. We survived, and we won. And we built something better from the ashes. She was 60 years old now, her hair completely gray, her body carrying the scars of a lifetime of war, but for the first time since that terrible morning when the sky had burned. She felt something like peace. The Terran Federation, built from the ruins of the old world, stood as the most powerful force in the galactic sector. Other species whispered about humanity, about their resilience, their creativity, their terrifying capacity for both mercy and vengeance, and carved into the base of the Geneva Memorial, in every human language, were 3 words that would define humanity's future among the stars. Never again ever, forgotten ever Asurander. Stars that had once seemed so threatening now held infinite promise and humanity. Born from tragedy and forged in fire, was ready to meet them not as prey, not as conquerors, but as survivors who had earned their place among the cosmos through blood and sacrifice and the unbreakable will to endure. The slaughter had been meant to end humanity instead. It had made them eternal,